So each Championship club had a different set of expectations on them at the start of the season, but so far, how well has your club met your expectations from the start of the season? That's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. So we're going to be throwing every Championship side into this tier list, whether they've gone above and beyond, above expectations, they're bang on, below, or massively below. And we're judging this of what we all sort of collectively thought of each side at the start of the season and how much they've gone ahead and gone past those expectations or fallen behind. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this one down below, but without any further ado, let's jump in. Burnley, I think, is a fairly obvious one to start. I think they've gone above and beyond. I think, yes, they did spend a lot of money in the summer transfer window, but going back to the start of the season, no one expected, a relatively rookie manager coming into the Championship in Vincent Kompany and a totally new group of players to just walk the league and potentially set a new point record in the process, which they could still go on to do this season. Yes, I think a lot of people expected Burnley to be good, but the levels they've reached this season and how much of a cakewalk it's actually been for them, I think they've gone above and beyond those expectations, because even the most die-hard and optimistic Burnley fans I didn't think would have, thought they'd have had it this good this season. On the flip side of that, Watford, I think they've been massively below expectations. I think given that at one stage prior to a ball being kicked, I think Watford were the outright favourites for promotion at one point, and the fact we're discussing them now as if, they might not even make the top six, I think that's falling massively below expectations. Start of the season, people were expecting top six as a bare minimum, and, probably more so than that. I thought they'd be in a real automatic race this season. It's not unfolded like that. They've had 3 different managers and it's all been a little bit of a collective mess, where I do think they've fallen massively below expectations given the squad and resources they've had. Millwall, I'm going to say above expectations for them. I expected them to be good and solid and in and around the playoff picture, but how they've just about been able to step up to that next gear. Last couple of years really in the Championship under Rowett, they've been building towards this, but always felt like they were just lacking that little bit of something to go ahead and get over the line. And the fact that they've done all this whilst losing, arguably their best player from last season in Jed Wallace as well, brilliantly replaced him, and all things considered, I think are above expectations right now. Preston, probably bang on, to be honest, from where I think everyone thought we'd be at the start of the season to where we are now. Not really having any fears for going down, but I wouldn't say we're above expectations, because I think a lot of people did expect just a standard mid-table finish, and as of right now, I think that's been the case with North End. I'd also say that Stoke are pretty bang on with their expectations from the start of the season and where they are now as well. I think first half of the season they probably fell below that, but a consistent ride lately under Alex Neil has eased them away from the relegation picture. Don't think many of us were talking about Stoke like they were going to be promotion chasers at the start of the season, but don't think a lot of us were speaking about them like they were, bang on for relegation or anything like that. So where they are in the table, I think, is about bang on for what their expectations were at the start of the season. Blackpool, they're in the relegation zone at the moment. I don't feel as if they're massively below expectations, because I think a lot of people expected this year to be a struggle, but I'm still going to say below expectations, coming off the back of Critchley leaving in the summer, a bit of a topsy-turvy transfer window as well on top of that, but the massive unbeaten run that they went on at one stage of this season and how far they have fallen off from last season, which was a really comfortable year for them, I would say that Blackpool have been below expectations this time around. Might be a bit of a controversial one, because Reading haven't been playing very good football of late, but I'm actually going to say they've been above expectations this season. They were one of the favourites to be relegated at the start of the season. I personally had them in my bottom 3, and I don't think they've been in the bottom 3 all season. As that's been the case, they have been working under massive constraints in terms of the contracts they can offer out, the players they can actually sign as well. So while it hasn't been particularly pretty over these last few months, I'd still say that in terms of where they are in the league table, it is above expectations right now, because the vast majority of us thought they were going down at the start of the season, and if they don't have that point deduction applied to them, I think they will stay up. Swansea, I'm gonna say below expectations, maybe maybe even argument for massively below, to be honest, because I think a lot of people really thought that things were clicking into place for Swansea, and this was finally going to be a season where, you know, Russell Martin had all the pieces that he wanted. You know, Obafemi was on fire. The second half of last season, Perot, things had really clicked as well. But this season has just been a little bit of a regression from that, really, which has been quite disappointing to see. Norwich, I feel, are in quite a similar boat to Watford, really, where this season hasn't been a total disaster, but they were tipped as one of the outright favourites to be promoted at the start of the season. The fact that they're not even in the top 6 right now, and there is a real chance, given their fixture running, that they do miss out on the top 6 this season. I think they have been massively below expectations. It was why Dean Smith ultimately had to be fired, and given the fact that they're not in that automatic promotion race whatsoever, given the resources they had and the expectations, I would say they're massively below this season. Sunderland, I think, are above expectations. I think not a lot of people had them going down at the start of the season, or even in a relegation battle, given the solid recruitment and the general size of the club coming back up to the Championship. But how comfortable they've actually been, you know, to threaten to challenge for a playoff place, really speaks to the good work that's gone on sort of behind the scenes there, and the general trajectory of the club as well. So yeah, above expectations this season for me, Sunderland. Wigan, I'm going to say below expectations. I think a lot of us expected them to be in a relegation battle, but maybe not quite as turgid as things have actually been at Wigan at points of this season. Thinking about the different managers that they've gone through throughout the season, how well they actually started out the year, looking quite solid, but how things have generally regressed from that point, I'd say below expectations. Rotherham were the outright favourites to be relegated at the start of the season, and I'm going to have to put them in above expectations. They're not in the bottom 3 right now. Of course, there is still that chance that they do get dragged back into the relegation zone and do go down, but generally speaking, over the year so far, Rotherham have looked more competitive than they have done over their previous stints in the Championship, and because of that, I'd say they've been above expectations. QPR, I'm going to have to put in massively below. I think there was a feeling with QPR, particularly with the excitement of Beale coming in, how well they started the season, some of the great flair players that they've got in there, that this would be a comfortable top half, maybe even more than that sort of season. But how everything has collapsed in on itself at QPR, I ultimately have to say that I think this has turned out to be a massively below expectation sort of season, particularly if they are relegated this season, which I don't think anyone saw coming at the start of the season, and the fact that that's still a real possibility with how bad they've been of late, I have to say they've been massively below. Bristol City, probably about bang on. I think a lot of people had them in that solid mid-table portion of the table, and that has been where they've been for the vast majority of the year under Pearson, slowly building, but not really threatening to do all too much above that. Hull are a bit of an impossible one to judge, really. I'm going to say bang on because this is around about where I expected them to be, but Hull's expectations at the start of the season were wildly different depending on who you asked, whether that was general fans, the bookies, or anything like that, because of the influx of players that came in over the summer. You know, some people were saying this is going to completely, you know, they're going to crash and burn this season, it's not going to work. Other people were saying they're going to fly up the league and be a real challenger for the top 6, but in the middle they've sort of been somewhere in the middle of that, and that's where I sort of had them placed at the start of the season, and because of that I'm going to say they are about bang on for expectations. But Hull are a little bit of a weird one to judge, really, because there were vastly contradicting thoughts about them at the start of the year. You know what, Blackburn Rovers, I'm going to have to put them in above and beyond. I didn't expect them to be challenging for the top 6 this season. I really didn't. I thought it would be a little bit of a reset and a long transition in terms of what they want to be under John Dole Thomason. When you come away from a manager like Mowbray, it's difficult to see how that club was going to react. You know, they had challenged for a playoff place in years gone by, but given the relative strength of that squad, looking at some of the other sides who I expected to be in the top 6 at the start of the season, I didn't think Blackburn would be as good as they were, and I actually think I had them predicted to be bottom half at the start of the season, which speaks to how I sort of rated their chances at the start of the year. But they've gone way above that this season, and for me, have been above and beyond expectations. Huddersfield Town, I'm going to have to say massively below. We have to bear in mind what the thinking was on Huddersfield at the start of the season. They've been in the bottom three for the vast majority of the year, but coming into this season, this was a team that, yes, they had lost their manager and, probably their two best players from last season as well, but it was a team who had made it to the playoff final, and no one was really discussing this side as the outright favourites for relegation. I think a lot of us expected a regression, but generally speaking, I've gone back to look at some of the comments. A lot of people, and Huddersfield fans included, had them predicted to be in and around mid-table this season. So the fact that they have been so uncompetitive for such a large portion of the season, I'm going to have to put them in massively below expectations, especially because of how much they've gone ahead and fallen off from last season as well. Cardiff, I do think have been a little bit below expectations this season. I think quite a few of us expected this season to be a little bit of a transition year, but the lack of goals and creativity and ultimately how they have been in this relegation picture for the vast majority of the year, I think a lot of us expected it to be a little bit more comfortable for this Cardiff side this year. West Brom, I'm going to say below expectations. I'm not going to be as harsh on them as I have been on Watford and Norwich, because I don't feel as if the expectations on them were quite as high as those clubs were last season. I think a lot of people expect them to be in the playoff picture, and it's taken them quite a bit of time, playing catch up because of how slow they started under Bruce, but they are back in that playoff picture now. But if they don't make it into the top six with the relative strength of that squad compared to some of the other sides who are above them at the moment, I do think that's them falling below expectations. Coventry, probably slightly above expectations. I think a lot of people did expect a steady improvement from this Coventry side this season. I think they'd finished 12th in the previous season and have sort of kicked on from that point, whereby they are, serious playoff challenges at this point. And I would probably put that as slightly above expectations, but I think a lot of people regarded this Coventry side quite well at the start of the season anyway. I know I certainly did. Birmingham, for their squad strength, probably about bang on, but you could maybe argue above expectations for them on a similar line to Reading as well, just because of the volume of people that had them in their bottom three at the start of the season, because of how many off the pitch issues that they had going on at the time, because it was a fairly inexperienced manager coming in John Eustace as well. Birmingham, if I remember rightly, were in a lot of people's picks for the bottom three at the start of the season, and because they've not really been in that bottom three picture all season, I'd say that's them slightly above expectations, all things considered. Middlesbrough, do you know what? They are sort of bang on, which is weird to say because they've been, absolutely flying under Michael Carrick, and they were so bad at the start of the season under Wilder, but the vast majority of people had them at least in their top 4 championship predictions from the start of the season, and they're third in the table at the moment. So I'm actually going to say pretty bang on for what their expectations were at the start of the season. People were anticipating them to challenge the automatic spots under Wilder. They ended the previous campaign fairly well under him. It was a really well-resourced squad with a lot of different options, some high-quality loan players coming in. So Middlesbrough have been ace this season, but dare I say it, that was probably what was expected of them at the start of the season. It was just the fact that they fell so far below expectations under Wilder that this season's been such a wild ride for them, really. Luton Town, I'm going to have to chuck in the top tier above and beyond. I think some people, to be fair, were expecting another top 6 challenge this season. I certainly thought that they'd be there or thereabouts, but the fact that they're so comfortably sat in the top 6 at the moment, the fact that they could even potentially challenge still for automatic promotion, I think I have to throw them into that top tier, really. A lot of hardened Championship fans, like I said, were expecting good things from them once again and to build on the success of last season and making the playoffs, but looking back on it, the bookmakers really weren't fancying Luton's chances for another top 6 finish this time around. Revisiting the video I did before a ball had been kicked about how the bookies predicted the Championship table, Luton were well down there in mid-table. So everything taken into consideration, I think it has been another season of above and beyond expectations for Luton. Then for Sheffield United, and dare I say it, a little bit above expectations. At the start of the season, I think the vast majority of us had the Blades down as a top 6 side, but not that many people actually had them down for the top 2, and the fact that it's been pretty exclusively them and Burnley as the top 2 all season, I would say they've been slightly above expectations this time around. I also don't think that we can take for granted the fact that You know, Sheffield United have been so good, and it would have been easy for them to have fallen below the expectations like the, you know, other parachute teams. We've seen, you know, Watford, Norwich and West Brom doing the same. At the start of the season, I think I had Sheffield United predicted to finish 4th, so the fact that they have been so comfortably 2nd for a lot of the year, I would say that's slightly above expectations for me, albeit the expectations were big on them at the start. But guys, there we have it. Those were my thoughts on how each Championship side has met their expectations so far this season. Would you agree with my list? Let me know down below, and do leave a like if you did go on to enjoy. But other than that, guys, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all